Obama, don't meet with the war criminals. Don't do business with the bloody Saudi monarchy. Stop the bloody regime in Saudi Arabia. Stop the killing in Yemen. Stop the killing in Yemen. The Saudi regime is killing women and children in Yemen. Stop the bloody Saudi monarchy. The Saudi regime has blood on its hands. The Saudi regime has blood on its hands. Stop the killing. Stop the killing in Yemen. Stop the Saudis from killing in Yemen. Stop the killing. Stop the Saudi killing in Yemen. Stop the killing in Yemen. Stop the Saudi monarchy. It represses its own people. It represses women. It spreads extremist ideology. Stop the Saudi regime. Stop the bloody Saudi regime. Don't do business with Saudi Arabian monarchs. They crushed the democracy movement in Bahrain. They deal with the bloody Egyptian coup regime. They don't let women drive. They don't give women equal rights. They repress bloggers and human rights activists. Free Raif Badawi. Stop the bloody Saudi regime. Shame on all of you. Shame on all of you.
I'll be speaking to Medea Benjamin, the co-founder of CODEPINK. She's been involved in a number of activities around the Saudi regime recently, and she and our own Middle East Crisis Committee and a number of organizations have started a project, which we will talk about, called End the U.S. Saudi Alliance. Good morning.
Good morning, Stan. Nice to hear your voice.
The CODEPINK's done some stuff with Saudi Arabia for a while, right?
We have been working for quite a while on the political prisoners in Saudi Arabia, like Raif Badawi, the blogger who is sentenced to 10 years in jail and 1,000 lashes. We've also doing work on behalf of some of the human rights lawyers. In general, we've been organizing protests at the Saudi embassy. Some of us have been working on the Bahrain issue, and so when the Saudis came in and crushed that democratic uprising, we were protesting the Saudis. So yes, we've been involved for a while.
And now this is a step up because it's actually saying to the U.S. government and the alliance with Saudi Arabia.
Well, yes, and I think it's particularly critical now because of the Saudi role in Yemen. As CODEPINK, we travel to Yemen, and we know a lot of Yemenis who work in human rights issues over there, and they've been sending us terrible messages and photos and pleas talking about the humanitarian crisis. So we think it's more important than ever to be focusing on Saudi Arabia.
Now, several days, I guess it was last week now, just a few days ago, though, you were involved with, let's say, demonstrations. So first you went to a hotel last Thursday, is that right?
Yes, we got a message saying that the Saudi King Salman, who was scheduled to meet with President Obama on Friday, had flown in with a huge entourage of hundreds of people, and we're staying at the very glamorous Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. In fact, I think they booked the whole hotel. And so we rushed over there, and we joined our Saudi friend Ali Al-Ahmed in a protest outside, which was got very nasty quickly because the pro-Saudi, pro-King groupies who were outside were very upset to see protesters. In fact, they started screaming and yelling and even grabbing our signs and tearing them up, at which point we had to get the police to remind them that they were not in Saudi Arabia, they were actually in the United States, where people are allowed to do things like hold up signs.
Could you see any of the signs of the opulence? I read that the king had rented 400 Mercedes to ferry around his entourage.
Well, there were fancy cars everywhere, and it turned out that one of them, though, belonged to John Kerry, who had come to greet the Saudi king as soon as he arrived. So, yes, and that they put down red carpets so his feet wouldn't have to touch any feet that other normal people had stepped on. He had his own carpet.
Yeah, that is a problem when you have to touch the concrete. So that was Thursday, and that was just a handful of you, right?
Well, it was actually just three of us, myself, Tig, and Ali Al-Ahmed, and because it was such a last-minute notification. But we certainly made a lot of noise, and we saw the kind of thugs that the Saudi regime attracts. That, in fact, when we would say things like, women can't even drive in Saudi Arabia, the men would laugh and say, that's good, we don't want women to drive. And they were just quite nasty, creepy people. And they came out the next day as well when we had our rally in front of the White House.
So describe that. Who came to that?
There were quite a lot of people on the pro-Saudi side. We were with the anti-Saudi monarch side, and people on our side had come in from all over the country. They were Yemenis, who some of them came as far away as Dearborn, Michigan. Others had come in from New York. Some had come in from Virginia. And then on the pro-Saudi side, it was hard to tell, but it seemed like a lot of those folks were actually being paid by the Saudi regime. Why do I say that? Well, it seems when we engaged with them, some of them didn't have very much to say. They looked, some of them, as if they were quite poor, and they were not Saudis. They were Arabs from other countries.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we have to emphasize what's going on in Yemen. I mean, upwards of 5,000 dead, enormous devastation, and I mean, the American press is just disgraceful on it. It doesn't, just assumes we, the United States, has a right to cooperate with the Saudis to go in there.
Well, it is really terrible the way that the U.S. is collaborating, not only because the Saudis use U.S. weapons, but the U.S. is also giving logistical support for the Saudis to tell them where they bomb. And so many of the bombs have gone off in civilian facilities and killed civilians that the U.S. is really responsible for war crimes along with the Saudi government.
What kind of response did you get from passersby to the demonstration in front of the White House?
Well, it's interesting, Stan, because we had quite a number of different reasons why we should be opposing the Saudi regime, but I found that the one that seemed to resonate most with passersby was the issues of Saudi involvement around 9/11. In fact, there was a policeman, when we started to move away from the site, he said, "Oh, I think you better stay a little while longer," and he didn't tell us why, but it turned out that John Kerry's car was leaving, and I think the policeman wanted to make sure we were there with our signs while John Kerry went out, because when we related it to 9/11, then you saw a lot of interest in what we were saying.
That's interesting. There's still that part of the 9/11 official U.S. report. I forget how many pages.
42.
42 has not come to the light of day, and some say it shows that very high up people in the Saudi regime were involved or helping in some way.
Well, yes, it would be nice if we, the American people, were allowed to see what our own 9/11 Commission came up with, but that piece of the report has been classified, so we can't see it. But it is interesting when you said, how did people react? The other thing where we got a favorable response from people as we talked about the Saudis spreading extremist ideology, and including the ideology that is part of ISIS. So people in the U.S. didn't seem to resonate as much when you talked about Yemen or Bahrain, because they probably don't know what we're talking about. But when it's simpler things, like the spread of the extremist ideology, we got a lot of head noddings and thumbs up and thanks for being out here kind of thing.
So then later that day you went to another hotel, I understand?
Well, yes, after we left the White House, there was an all-day U.S. Saudi investment forum that was happening at another fancy hotel in town, the Ritz-Carlton. So we did a march from the White House to the Ritz-Carlton, and we had a protest there. Some of us managed to get inside, and I unfurled my Saudi Stop Killing Yemenis banner, and we got that on tape, which is actually traveling around in the Arab world of cyberspace and getting a lot of favorable feedback. And we also set up our camp outside the hotel and stayed for quite a while, greeting the people who were part of the forum as they came in and out, and asking them why they were doing business with such a bloody regime. We did manage to get into discussions with some of the people, and the more sympathetic ones came over and talked to us and said they weren't involved in business, but they wanted to find out what was being discussed. So we made some good contacts while we were there.
Interesting. It would be also great to find out who the Saudis are giving money to. I understand a number of American foundations and universities are getting Saudi money.
Well, it is quite remarkable to see all the think tanks in Washington, D.C., the K Street lobby firms that are getting paid by the Saudis, the universities, not only in town, but also around this country, that are getting a lot of Saudi money. Even the nice Carter Center, where Jimmy Carter is done such great programs about empowering women and girls, is getting several $1 million from the Saudis. So they've been very smart in spreading their largesse.
Now, how about with the Saudis and this Iran accord? Where Netanyahu came out very openly and obnoxiously against it, the Saudis had a different tactic.
That's right. The Saudis have been very smart. I think they've thought, all right, we don't want to hurt our relationship with President Obama, and we want to get something out of it. So I think what they got out of it is that they're going to get even more advanced U.S. weapons in the future, and that they're going to get the U.S. continuing help in their war in Iran. So I think...
You mean Yemen?
I'm sorry. Did it again. Yeah, in Yemen, their war against Iran, I should say. They have had a history of hostilities with Iran. They want to make sure the United States is not getting too close to Iran, and will continue to support the Saudis. And right now, that proxy war is being fought out in Yemen. So I think as part of this deal is to make sure that the U.S. continues to give all kinds of logistical supports to their Saudis while they bomb Yemen.
And more money from the U.S. I mean, some people know that we sell the Saudis immense amount of weapons, but what we've in this new project are trying to bring out is the cost, taxpayer money that's being spent on basing U.S. troops, fleets, and all that other stuff in the Persian Gulf. An immense amount of money being wasted. Well,
that's right. It is an enormous amount of our taxpayer money that goes to support the Gulf states, and then in quote return, the Saudis buy massive amounts of technology. And I think that as a result of this Iran nuclear deal and the talks that King Salman just had with Obama, the U.S. will be fast-tracking the release of American military technology and weapons to Saudi Arabia. And they talked specifically about buying two frigates that would be based in the Gulf. That's a deal valued at over $1 billion. And this is part of the modernization of the Royal Saudi Navy's Gulf patrolling with the support of U.S. Navy and, of course, the use of U.S. latest technology.
Would that their thinking becomes modern rather than their weapons.
Well, that's right. And if their thinking had become modern, it wouldn't be a monarchy and it wouldn't be a king who is representing Saudi Arabia. And that was one of the main things that we would say in our chants is that monarchies should be a thing of the past and that the United States government should not be supporting monarchies. We also, we talked, Stan, about all the different ways that Saudi represents what should be part of the Arab past, not part of the Arab present or future.
Well, thank you very much for this interview.
Okay, thanks, Stan.
I've been speaking to Medea Benjamin of CODEPINK about the effort to end the U.S. Saudi alliance. See more at the website Saudi-U.S.org. Thanks for listening.